All right, welcome back. I'm here with Rachelle Garcia from Innate Traditions, and thanks for being here again, Rachelle. I really look forward to all of our conversations. I feel like you have such potent medicine and wisdom to share with the world, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So last time we had our interview, we talked a lot about attachment. We talked a lot about the infancy stages. We talked about instinctual mothering. We shared some perhaps polarizing opinions as well. What I found was really interesting about some of the posts that you've shared in the past is that you've straight up just said, hey, there is one way to parent, and it's the
Hmm.
mammalian way. And that
Hmm.
wasn't intended to come across in this shaming way, right? Like, I never
Hmm.
experienced it as shaming or even talking about parenting styles. You were straight up just saying, like, hey, this is the biological instinct that we have as human beings, and this is what mammals require. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that really stuck out for me when you kind of simplified it in that way.
I mean, the simple way to say it is nature has a design, right? And I would
Yeah.
say that like the time that we're living in, the way that I track it is I would say it's a time of a bifurcation of the human race, where the human race is going in two different directions, and it's a real choice point
Mhm.
for humans. And the way that I see that splitting of directions is, do we align with nature, right? It's like, do we submit to something that is much greater than us, right? Do we align with natural law, or do we believe that we're better than,
Yeah.
right? And this, I would say, is like a transhumanistic agenda, right? That's like, I believe that I am better than nature and can dominate it, versus that I am part of nature and I align myself with it. So I'm going that way. Like, I am aligned with nature. I do not believe I'm better than nature. I understand that there's an order to life. There is law to the world that I don't get to decide. That is not my business to decide. So if I want to live in harmony with creation, then I better just understand the natural law and follow it, right? So if that's true in terms of how a flower grows, or how bees are necessary to pollinate the flowers, or any of the majesty that happens within the natural world, then it's got to be true for human life too. Okay.
Mhm.
And so then, if it's true for human life, what does that mean? It means that we have a design, and we can call that our blueprint. And that blueprint, has instructions, right? So, like traditional cultures, we'll call that the original instructions. And we can say that that original instructions is our biological design, is our physiologic design. And so, if that's already mapped out, we just have to follow it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we just have to follow it, then we can say, like, there is a way to be. Like, there is a way to be. And the way that I look at that is like, we have a map for human life. And because our biology is different when we're one, when we're 13, when we're 28, when we're 65, right? If we just understand our biology at these different points of time in our life, then we have a map to follow. And the map is part of this blueprint of life. It gives us directions, we follow it, and like that. So to me, when we talk about how humans have free will, it's like, clearly we have free will because we have choice. But to me, it's like one of the greatest cosmic jokes, okay? Because it's like, okay, here's the choice, okay?
Mhm.
You go this direction and you have health and wellness, and you can go that direction, and that's your choice, but that is leading you away from health and wellness to dis-ease. So
Mhm.
here's our free will. Okay. You get to choose, except only one way is going to direct you to health and wellness.
Mhm.
So, like, that's the cosmic joke
Yeah.
of free will, right? So within that, when we're looking with to our babies and our small children, they have a biological design of what they need. It's not my idea. It's not your idea. It's just life's design, right? And from 0 to 3, because they're making 1 million neural connections per second, right? And the amount of growth that's happening for them in the first 3 years of life, it's very specific what their needs are to thrive. So we
Mhm.
can say, I don't like that, and I am going to do this, and that's our free will. But there is consequences to us just not following that design, right?
Mhm.
So people can get offended at that, but it's like, who are you going to get offended at? Are you going to get offended at me for saying that? Are you going to get offended at like nature for it being like that? I mean, like I can get frustrated for sure of like that things are how they are. But I feel like so much, at least of my path at this time, is like there's so much um truth that so much of what we need to do as humans is accept
Mhm.
um, reality on this planet, accept
Mhm.
reality as it is so that we can align with life.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And there's, for me, this really loud invitation for reclamation of our own power and decision making. Because what I see, I'm a younger mother. Well, I'm not a young mom, but I have a young child. Um, and what I see all around me is a lot of learned helplessness, to put it
Mm-hmm,
frankly. A lot of mothers who are looking for permission to do things like co-sleeping, who are looking for
mm-hmm,
permission to hold their babies, who are looking for permission to nurse beyond 6 months, who are
mm-hmm,
looking for permission to not sleep train.
mm-hmm,
And what I come back to time and time again is as soon as you become a mother, you really need to get that figured out, this whole permission seeking thing, because
mm-hmm,
that's not what your child needs from you. And that's not what the world needs from you. The world
mm-hmm,
needs for you to trust your instincts and to stand firmly in what you know to be true because you can feel it in your body. And I think we're pretty disconnected from that sense at this time.
mm-hmm,
And so when you talk about coming back to living in harmony with nature, that just makes so much sense to me because if we are in tune, then there is really only one obvious choice because the other alternative would feel so bad in your body that you wouldn't be able to do it. And so
mm-hmm,
it's like not only are we taking that route to dis-ease, but we're also choosing something that feels so bad and that is so disconnected from what is actually true in nature that we have to exit our bodies and we have
mm-hmm,
to numb and distract in order to maintain that.
mm-hmm,
And so there is this, yeah, this reckoning that I think that we're facing right now where I see what you're saying. We're going in these like very polarized directions. And we're having to choose, which direction are you going to take? And those choices that we make in those early years have such an impact on the later years, which is what I'm excited to talk to you about today, which is, we're talking about going into adolescence and those teenage years. And I know that's where you're at in your mothering journey. And it's been something that's pretty fascinating to me too, because the narrative in our culture is that teenagers are just rebellious, stinky, annoyances. Like that's kind of how our culture views teenagers. Like, oh, just wait till they're a teenager. It's just
mm-hmm,
like so negative. And the reality is that teenagers are going through this huge initiation, this like incredible transformative time where they're trying to figure out where they belong and if they're important. And then we're just telling them they're not. And then we wonder why it's so hard to get along with them.
mm-hmm,
And we, if we didn't have those needs met early on, then the trust isn't built. So that attachment foundation isn't there, right? And
mm-hmm.
so, how do you see those early years as laying the foundation for that second most important time of our lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like thinking about these connection points between these kind of two topics, and like one of the inroads and the loops that I can see that connects it up. And I think it's where we left off last time, actually, in our conversation, which was about like when we take, mothering young children. And I'm not sure if we like recorded this or if this was after our recording last time,
Mhm.
but in the world of maternal mental health, of which I've been like a big part, right, for the past 10 years. And you can still go on to all of these like maternal mental health Facebook groups and like that. And, uh, it's constantly like therapists being like, working with this mother with extreme anxiety, right? And everyone's like, what does she have anxiety about? And then they're like, well, she has to go back to work. And so she's feeling anxious about leaving her baby. So what can I do? Like what therapies can I offer her? Right. So then here comes everyone of like their different therapeutic ideas. Okay. You can do this to help her work her anxiety. You can do this to help her work her anxiety. And then here will come in someone invariably with like, oh, and Zoloft or, other prescription meds to help mediate the anxiety. And I'm just looking at all of this and I'm like, do people not track what's going on here? And I'm like, how about we understand that her feeling anxious about leaving her little baby to go to work is normal. Like
Yeah.
that's a normal response because her animal body is like, this is not normal, right? And so whatever it is that we have been colonized to believe in our minds, to rationalize, to like make logic, right? And even if it's some for real thing that like this mom for real needs to work for money for, like all the realities that exist, her body registers this as not good and safe. And so then she feels anxious. She doesn't need
Mhm.
fucking therapy. She could be in therapy for 3 years to try to like work out her anxiety,
Mhm.
or medicate herself. But like that anxiousness is a normal, healthy response as a mother to a young baby, right?
Mhm.
So, like weaving that into all the things you're talking about, right? It's like, um, how do we begin to trust more deeply our instincts, right? You're talking about this. There's like this piece around personal authority, which I feel like is what we are collectively learning at this time on the planet. Like I call it a time of repair. And one of the biggest pieces of repair we're doing is around personal authority, right? And then, like, as adults and as mothers, as fathers, it's like, what do we believe is happening in relationship with our children?
Yeah.
Okay. Like we have to foundationally answer that because it's like we get into this thing of like, my child is behaving like this. My child, it's like, no. Okay. Our children are reflecting back to us constantly all of our own unhealed caca to help us evolve.
Mhm.
Okay. And we have this notion that like we're teaching our kids as parents, but it's like our kids are the future and they're coming in with a different let's say program because they're going to live further into the future than we are, so they are there to help us grow. We're guiding them because we have more life experience, but they are teaching us and they are revealing to us all of our unhealed parts to integrate and to come into wholeness, right? So same thing with our little children, right? We get triggered in a certain way and all the stuff that comes up, there's our material to work with, right? And then, transferring into the teen years, it's like that's like a whole new set of material, right? You're going to get triggered and it's like my teen is but it's like no, our teens are reflecting to us deeper layers of all of our own healed caca, right? So yeah, like okay, we're going to reparent ourselves as like little 1 year old, like 1 year old Rachelle and 3 year old Rachelle, and we can have heart for that. And what about then we're going to reparent ourselves as 13-year-old Rachelle, right? And all of the unhealed, unintegrated um, parts of ourselves from our adolescence that for 98% of modern day people was a shit show. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
our kids get to the teen years And then it's like, I mean, I trip out on the stuff that I have to like confront, like this is another angle of what we were talking about before we started recording. But like my daughter is 13, right? And uh, what happens for our teenagers as they go through puberty, like from a biological place, we can understand this is this differentiation. Okay. And the
Mhm.
differentiation is things like one of my good friends has two boys, and before they went through puberty, they would sit in her lap and they like loved how her armpit smelled, and they were
Yeah.
just like all about her. And then they went through puberty and they're like, you smell sick, mom, and they were like, so grossed out. And our teens will get grossed out, right? They are not ego boosting
Mhm.
beings to be around us then, right? But like, from a biological perspective, you don't want your sons attracted to you as a
Yeah.
mom, right? So there's this biological differentiation that happens. And they also are looking for guidance from adults other than their parents at that time. That's like normal and healthy, right? And so like for with my daughter, for example, and not that this is like this for all kids, but it's pretty common. She is all of a sudden not want to cuddle. Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm like such a touchy feely, cuddly, like affection person. And she's just like every now and then, like there will be like, like micro doses of it, but like 5% of how much we used to cuddle. Okay.
Oh
So,
God.
yeah. Okay. So what I could do, and then you can realize your manipulation power as an adult. Okay.
Mhm.
Because it's important to be aware of that. I could like coerce her into cuddling. I could like guilt trip her into that. I
Mhm.
could project all of my needs onto her. And for people who are listening and think that sounds weird, like that's what most adults do.
Yeah.
Because to allow a child at that age what they need and not project your hurt feelings onto them, okay, of like what you want, what I need. Okay. It's not about like what I need because it's about what they need.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for me to just sit with my feelings of like the grief of like, whoa. And then realize actually how much of mothering like we think we're giving. Okay. But how much we're receiving through our act of giving. And then all of a sudden, because of their differentiation and they don't want to receive from you like that anymore, you realize actually how much you were receiving.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is the kind of stuff that gets triggered as our kids get older. And again, as an adult, it would be a real easy thing, like in our unconscious habituation, to project, to manipulate, to conjure, you know what I mean? To like get my needs met. Right. But because from where I'm at and I'm like respecting her bodily desires, her consent, and what she needs, because if we're actually mothering and not trying to like be quote unquote friends with our children, it's not like an equal relationship if we're mothering, right? Mothering is I am going to be who my child needs me to be, right? It's not without this reciprocity in return like we get in adult relationships. Then
Yeah.
I need to check myself a lot. I can so easily feel in my body,
Mhm.
okay, um how our lack of maturity as adults could spill over and distort our children's perception of reality and override what it is they're asking for or what it is they need. So it actually takes so much inner work to show up for our teenagers because the stuff that comes up is hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah, you just said so much there that really had light bulbs going off for me. And it reminded me of a mentor that I have who's in her 60s now. And she was telling me about when she first had her children. And she had this really deeply suppressed sexual trauma that she hadn't faced, and she hadn't even really recalled it until after her birth. And then it actually evoked a memory. for
Mm-hmm.
her that she had lost. And she spent many years working that out. And she told me how her child was actually acting out some of the memories that she had suppressed through
Mm-hmm.
play in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had never spoken about it, never told
Mm-hmm.
him anything, of course, because he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she's just been such a pillar for me and sort of showing me how intrinsically linked we are in terms of the growth journey and the awakening journey of mothering. And she said it was really shocking at times where he would just be acting out these pretty gruesome things in his play,
Mm-hmm.
and it would evoke something for her that she would then have a deeper layer to work through. And I think the common belief amongst the mainstream parenting world is that children just come in, ready to be shaped.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we're here to teach them how to be and impart our wisdom onto them. And so much of that feels really untrue for me. I remember having my daughter and having just sort of the doors blown off of my reality and going, oh my God, so many of the things that I thought I had control over are not true. Like I thought I made this soul contract and that we were going to have like this kind of life and that I could protect her from certain things and certain experiences if I just mother her deeply enough. But then I was like, oh, you're a whole being already, like with this whole soul path, this whole incarnation that you've sort of preset. You've come here for these certain lessons, and I'm just here to hold you through it and like hopefully help to preserve your essence and be your safe place because you're here to experience what you're here to experience. Um, and so when I see, I'm in a lot of these gentle parenting groups as a fly on the wall, and I just kind of get to see a lot of the questions. And I'm telling you 100 times a day, it's mostly just questions about like, how do I get my kid to stop doing blank? And it's usually just the most developmentally appropriate thing that their kid is doing. And they just
Mm-hmm.
want it to be over quicker. And
Mm-hmm.
usually I just say, hey, this is really normal. If you just find a way to practice patience and let them be your teacher, before you know it, they're going to move on to a new thing. And you just have to sort of ride those waves. And what it's reminding me of is this like really important trust building phase that happens in those first 3 years. That if you have that, then when you get to those teen years, you've done your work and
Mm-hmm.
your teenager or you're about to be teenager actually trusts you because you haven't spent their whole life up till now trying to like diminish them or dim their expression or control them. We hear this word obedience a lot,
Mm-hmm.
still in the parenting world, like as if you want an obedient child. And I've had people say, like, oh, well, she's just not a very obedient child. And I was like, well, I don't ever want an obedient child. Why would you want an obedient child?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this interesting mindset that we still have over children that we think that we're, here to control them in such a way. And then you get to the teenage years and then you have no trust, no attachment built. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think it can look a lot different. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I can layer into that, the obedience thing is just absolutely insane because it's really within a like worldview of control and domination, right? And
Yeah.
then there can be like the other extreme where parents like aren't in their authority and they're like, whatever my child wants to, and I feel bad to put boundaries, because
Hmm.
I don't want to harp in their freedom, right? So it's like within
Hmm.
these crazy pendulum swings, it's
Yeah.
like we need to be mature adults and understand that because we are older, we have more life experience. And that's why we're guiding. Like, we don't ask our 2-year-olds if they want to take a bath, if it's just time to take a bath. You're not like
Hmm.
asking a question. You're like, you're the captain of the ship. And so you're guiding this ship, right? But like this mutuality of respect and acknowledgement that, yeah, our children are their own beings. And yes, absolutely, if we're not cultivating that with them through their younger years, it's going to be a shit show for us, absolutely, in their teen years. Because, and it's not even that, like, even if we do that, there is no guarantee that it won't be a shit show. Because I have so
Mhm.
many good friends actually who have been in such connection and attachment in a good way with their kids, and the teen years are a point of differentiation.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what I feel like I could add in, that I literally feel like I'm like, should I tell everyone this because it's like this
Mhm.
secret? But I'm like, I have to tell everyone this because I'm like, if someone would have told me this, it really would have um shifted some of the ways that I mother. But like, anything you want to seed within your child, okay, in terms of core values, in terms of understanding, in terms of foundational understanding of who they are, like, needs to get seeded before puberty,
Mhm.
okay? Because again, puberty as this point of differentiation, like, for sure, if you're in connection with your children, like, they're going to listen to you as you listen to them, but
Yeah.
they are more receptive to other adults and to external factors. But like the coreness, like, it's everything that happens before puberty.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, in relationship to our bodies, for the young women, in relationship to menstrual health and well-being, like, in relationship to all the things like that gets seeded from us by the time they're 9 years old,
Mhm.
you know? But again, and like what I see in the teen times, right? Again, like kind of transferring that from like the little kid thing to the older kid thing, is this idea of like, I'm the parent and I know, okay?
Mhm.
And so therefore you will listen to me in this obedience.
Mhm.
But teens, if you don't listen to them first and you just
Mhm.
try to like talk at them with like your lecture, your download of like what it is they need to know, they will not fucking listen to you.
Mhm.
So it's like, if you want a teen to like listen to you, like what you have to share that might be of value, you have to first listen to them.
Yeah.
You have to literally listen and connect, because their bullshit radars are so high. And
Mhm.
I think of teens kind of as gargoyles, right? They're like,
Mhm.
and it's like, if you respond and you're like, oh well, oh, and you don't come into their space, they're like, see, you're not for real. Like, you're
Mhm.
not willing to like come in. But it's like, if you see the gargoyle, right? And you still come in and you're like, yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, right? And then you're really present and you listen and you're receptive to them, then they'll be receptive to you, right? But they don't
Mhm.
want people coming in and just talking at them, you know?
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
don't.
well, it's the difference between respect and dismissiveness.
Yeah.
Like they're sensitive to that, and I
Mhm.
see it too, just in the cultural conversations that are had. Even now, people reference when I hit the teen years with my own daughter, and they'll say things that basically imply that like I won't like her anymore, or I won't have all of these feelings that I have for her, and it makes me sad, to be honest, because I'm like, wow, that's just so heartbreaking that that's your
Mhm.
view of parenting, and that we're so disconnected from ourselves, because there is a huge transition happening, not just for the child, but also for the parent. Like, even when you're talking about what's happening for you in terms of
Mhm.
you having to let go of this
Mhm.
relationship as you knew it, like that's a death,
Mhm.
right? And so when we go through these teen years, there is a death happening of
Mhm.
the relationship as we knew it. And then we have
Mhm.
to completely recenter in this new
Mhm.
way
Mhm.
to see these beings in a whole new light and relate to them in a whole new way so that they trust us. And we can really sort of bypass that and then focus too much on them and what they're doing or not doing, And I wonder what it would be like if we had more invitations from people who are ahead of us on this journey. You know, if I had somebody like you saying, hey, what's actually going on for you right now? Instead of just like your teen isn't behaving the way that you want them to, you know, that could change a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is another connection point between like the little kid years and the older kid years, right? In the same way that all these moms are getting on medication when their kids are little, just to be
Yeah.
able to like um cope with their realities. Okay.
Hmm.
There's all of these moms getting on medication when their kids are teens, right? Because of all the stuff that comes up and the overwhelmingness of it. So instead of like doing the deeper dive into the overwhelmingness, right? And seeing like what is here for me,
Yeah.
to what part of me, what part of this relationship needs to die? Who do I need to become in order to keep showing up and mothering, fathering my teen? It's
Hmm.
like there's this medication thing that's going on. So as you see this rise in teenagers going on anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications, the parents are also going on these pharmaceuticals at that time as well, right?
Hmm.
Because it's like the enormity of what comes up is so intense. I mean, I know from like experiencing things already here. My daughter's only 13. I'm like in the beginning of the teen years,
Yeah.
right? But it's like all of the feelings that come up. It's like we have to continue to build our capacity, right? To grow, to meet our teens. Like for me, how it feels is like for me to stay relevant, that's the word that for me to stay relevant to my daughter, okay, as she's evolving into a young adult, I need to continue to heal. Otherwise, like we become irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And then parents want to say, well, it's because my teen. No, it's because we're not doing the work that they're asking us to do to stay relevant and to be able to continue to meet each other along the path.
Hmm. What's some of that work that you see teens are asking parents to do on that journey?
Well, I feel like a big thing is that transition from little kid to older kid when they don't need us physically, they don't want us in that same way. And taking ownership, I would say, especially as women, for the ways that we have not been meeting our own needs, because I think a huge part of early motherhood is overriding our own needs, okay, to meet the needs of our babies,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And if we haven't been consciously centering our needs for years because we've been overriding them to take care of our babies, and then those babies are bigger and then they don't need us the same way, it's like, what do you need? What do you need? And what do you want to feel whole and complete,
Hmm.
irrespective of your motherhood?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, I feel like the question is constantly, how can we be whole and complete individuals, irrespective of our motherhood or our fatherhood?
Hmm.
So it's like a paradox because it's like my whole life is mothering my daughter, right?
Hmm.
And then simultaneously, I need to be whole and complete without that identity.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it sounds complex.
It's super
Sounds
complex
complex to figure that one out.
because when they're teens, they want to see us fulfilled. And they want to see us fulfilled not just through our mothering or fathering them, they
Mhm.
want to see living examples of adults thriving. How can they have something to look forward to in coming into their adult years if they
Yeah.
don't see us happy?
Yeah.
And our happiness cannot be contingent upon them
Hmm.
because they might trigger the shit out of us, okay, because of all the things we've been talking about. And then we can say, well, I'm not happy because of you,
Hmm.
okay, and then here's the living example that they're getting.
Hmm.
So what is the inner work we need to do to be fulfilled, integrated adults oriented to life?
Yeah. We're re-individuating in a sense, right? It's
Yes,
like
absolutely.
they're individuating, but we're re-individuating and we're having to find parts of ourselves that were kind of dormant for a really long
Yeah.
time, I
And
would
it's a
imagine.
trippy thing because when you're mothering, like how you're mothering or how I mother, you're like, what the hell? Because
Mhm.
we have been so like
Yeah.
this, right? And so it's really painful. Like for me, I mean, I can't, but for
Mhm.
me, it's like really painful to re-individuate
Mhm.
and um be like, oh, whoa, that's
Yeah.
the next part that's needed.
I can only imagine because since having my daughter, one of the things that I've had to confront a lot is the depths of grief that I feel just in acknowledging that I'm here to guide her, but that I don't get to keep her, and just knowing that from the beginning, and
Hmm.
just feeling the deepest, most pure devotional love that I've ever felt in my life. And also in every moment, holding her as a capable being who's here to have her own journey.
Hmm.
And, seeing her just even like bump her knee or fall, it just guts me. And I remember talking to my homeopath a few months after she was born, and I was telling her about this deep process I was in. And she said, how did you learn this? Because the process that you're going through right now is the process that I'm usually guiding people through once they have teens.
Hmm.
She's like, you're very like early to this, you know?
Hmm.
And sometimes I've felt scared, just how am I going to feel this forever? Am I now just going to be feeling this deeply for the rest of my life? Can I handle that? Is it too much?
Hmm.
It's never been mothering is hard, or I miss my freedom, or, this sucks. It's like, oh my God, I just don't know if I can feel this deeply forever. This is like a lot to feel and a lot to
Hmm.
grieve. And um, I can't imagine really like what you're experiencing right now. And the other piece to it that comes up for me too is that a lot of times when we are in this re-individuation process and our teens are becoming these adult beings, then we might also be going through these biological changes like perimenopause or menopause too, um, which of course would make it even more intense.
Hmm. Totally. I'm gonna see like what I wanted to track to in there. For me, I feel like part of this like re-individuation process, like what feels so challenging is I feel like it took me all of those years to adjust to or to integrate that level of like intertwining, right? That level of like didactic living with my daughter, right?
Mhm.
Because it was such I don't want to say a shock, but it felt like such a big integration for me to go from like being a single woman to a mother and all that that implied. And I feel like just
Mhm.
as I got used to it, then it's
Mhm.
like now it's time to let go and let go and let go and let go, you know?
Mhm.
And it is just such a crazy thing that so few people talk about. Like my daughter, and you start to get right those clarities about who your child is from the time they're in your womb and from the time they're little and like how they're going to
Mhm.
be. And my daughter has always been like very clear with like certain things. And um, like lately she's saying things to me like, oh, when in her 20s, she's going to live in, and she'll like name these very far away places. And I'm
Mhm.
like, what? And I can't even like, clearly if it's not my child and I think about myself in my 20s, it's like, well, yeah, of course. Like
Yeah.
it's their time to go out and explore and blah, blah, blah. But then in my selfhood, and I'm imagining that and imagining like being in a different town from her or a different
Mhm.
state or like a different country. Like I have a hard time, like when we moved into this home where we live, she sleeps in her own room now, and we both have doors and they're both closed. Before that, we always had these kind of conjoining rooms. And I feel like this, I still feel I'm in a transition because I'm like, I can still hear her, but I can't hear her in the same way that I could. And I'm like, that movement of being in different houses,
Mhm.
in different places, I honestly don't know. I'm gonna probably have to do like a lot of different therapeutic support to like work through that,
Yeah.
because it's like one thing to say, but it's another thing to embody when we have been mothering in this way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's just evoking a lot in me because I'm just imagining that and yeah, feeling the depths of grief and separation that we have to endure. And it's like we sign up to love our kids forever and they're the most important beings in our world, but actually we're not meant to be the most important beings in their world. So it's like kind of like signing up to have your heart broken, but in like the most beautiful way.
Yeah, I mean, it just
Yeah.
really is such a trip. And like, and that is a part of the thing too that's challenging in the teen years because teens, like, just because of their brain development, I can't speak to all of it, but it's like the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing until they're 25. And like teens don't see things how we see things as adults. Like they don't have the biological capacity to have the awareness that we do. So this is another thing, like as parents, we don't understand the different biology of our teens, it's really easy to be like, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. But it's like they literally, like we literally are that part of their brain for them.
Hmm.
Like they literally can't do that, right? It's like say
Yeah.
screaming at a 2-year-old to calm down. Like they literally
Hmm.
can't, okay, because they're
Hmm.
co-regulating with us. And our teens literally can't do things that to us are obvious, right?
Yeah.
But like part of that real biologically normal thing is that teens are more self-centered. They don't have the like developmental structures in place yet to have the awareness and the kind of empathy that we do as
Yeah.
adults. Okay.
Hmm.
So when we talk about devotional practice, I literally will sit like that some mornings in meditation to like give me the centering I need for the day because it is like my entire life is for my daughter.
Hmm.
Okay. And
Hmm.
she is like completely oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And so when
Yeah.
they're 3, we can say, well,
Yeah.
that's fine because there's 3.
Yeah.
When they're
Yeah.
older, there's this expectation that they're going to express gratitude, like what we would
Hmm.
want from an adult, right?
Yeah.
But it's like that is not part of the deal. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's like, yes, we can for sure share about cultivation of gratitude and appreciation and all of these things, but like they literally cannot see that our entire lives are a devotional practice for them. And
Hmm.
so, how do we keep showing up in the devotional practice without an expectation from them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And that's where that self-care piece and that self-nourishment piece comes in so strong.
It
Hmm.
is just so intense, so intense.
You know, it comes back to that quote that you had about the mammalian way to parent, right? Like, yeah, it's important to understand the infant brain, but what you're talking about is also reminding me, it's important to understand the teenager brain. And it's
Mhm.
important to understand too that even at 19, the brain is not fully developed. And
Mhm.
I was thinking, I was laying in bed the other night and I was like, you know, sure, maybe my daughter will want to move out at 19 and then I'll support her in that. But like, where do we even get the idea that that's when we move out? What if,
Mhm.
what if, what if we just didn't talk about that? And what if we
Mhm.
just said, you move out when you feel
We're
ready?
ready. Totally.
And like I
Mhm.
wonder if for a lot of young people, if they had a safe place and they felt respected and loved and free,
Mhm.
that they wouldn't move out until they were more like 25,
Mhm.
because that's when their prefrontal cortex is actually available.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of parents who hold grudges or resentments toward their teens or their young adults for behaving like teens or young adults.
Mhm.
And it's again, it's this loss of inner power. It's this loss of authority where they just have these high expectations and they still haven't claimed the role of parent and
Mhm.
guide and leader. And
Mhm.
it's like, no, you're the leader. You're the authority here. in this dynamic. You're the role model.
Mm-hmm.
It's not up to them to behave how you want them to behave all the time. It's up for you to model
Mm-hmm.
how they can show up when they are
Totally.
ready,
But
you
it's
know?
so much work. I mean, like the last week, and like this is how so everyone can have like real life, like tangible, real of how like this is for me, right? Like I will say things to my daughter, like, look, I know that you're 13, okay? And like we talk about this, and I know that um, you're in such a big time of development and like you don't see the things that I see and you like just can't have the awareness of the things that I have awareness about. And I know that it can be ridiculous sometimes that I can feel so frustrated by this, right? And I'm still feeling really frustrated, I'll
Yeah.
tell her, but like, and for me last Friday, it was like this lack of appreciation that I was feeling, like so it's like, it's just this messy thing, right? Because we're
Mhm.
not in the larger cultural holding. It's not like we're within this
Yeah.
like milieu of like, okay, we have all this other, dimensional support for this
Yeah.
process. It's like we're living in such dysfunction. So all I can do is like hold it on my own and be like, okay, I acknowledge all these things. I acknowledge this and I acknowledge my part. And like I am still feeling really frustrated because of all these ways I show up for you every day, all day in this devotional way. And I don't feel an expression of appreciation. And she said, I said thank you, right? Like I said thank you at dinner. And I was like, babes, I don't want you to tell me like thank you,
Mhm.
and then our kids are like these sages, like if we're going to be just honest with them in our communion, right? And she
Yeah.
said, well, I don't understand what it is that you're telling me that you need from me, okay? And she said, what is it that you're asking for, right?
Mhm.
Like she wants me to like be clear. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
so let me sit with that and think. And I was like, what I'm asking for, it was like, I want to go for a walk with you every night at sunset,
Mm.
because it's like she's just like they're so in their own world, and it's like she doesn't know that like I'm having all these feelings. She's just fucking being a teenager, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't ever hang out with you and I'm doing all these things for you and you like don't acknowledge me, and I'm like in this whole thing, and
Mhm.
like she's completely oblivious to that.
Yeah.
And like she's like, what do you want? you know? And I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to go for a walk with you at sunset so we can just have like that bit of time where we can connect. And she was like,
Mhm.
oh, I can do that,
Mm.
you know? So it's not like I have this dialed in. It's messy, and she like has to just be in the mess with me. But like I don't have templates to look at of like who's raising their teen in a freaking good way, like my friends for sure. But we're like the first generation in how many generations? So we're like figuring it out. So it's
Mm.
messy.
But
Yeah.
even what you just shared, and thank you for sharing that, I don't even know if you realize how beautiful that is, that she even had the capacity to sit and listen to you and then ask you clearly what you needed. Like that alone is so, so powerful because I would never have had that ability at 13 years old. I had
Totally.
no
Mhm.
language at all. Like I couldn't even let anyone see my emotion, let alone
Mhm.
have a dialogue with somebody about their uncomfortable feelings and then be in that type of relationship. Like what
Mhm.
you just described is something that I think so many teens would yearn for from a
Mhm.
mother. So I want to reflect that back to you because like that is a beautiful mess. Like
Mhm.
that's as beautiful as it gets. I just think we have this idea in our culture that if it's done well and if it's done quote right, that there's no mess. But I think learning how to do the mess in a good way is what
Mhm.
our teens need most from us.
Mhm.
I know that's what I needed. And yeah, I see you giving that. So
Mhm.
I hope you know that you are
Mhm.
doing a pretty epic job. And I'm really inspired by you. I think you're definitely a role model for the younger generation and for younger mothers who are just newer on this journey. And I talk to a lot of women who have gone through your course and are just like, oh wow, Rachelle has changed my life. And so I think the piece that would be nice for us all to have is those safe spaces to sit and cry and grieve and have our own entitled feelings of wanting more appreciation and wanting more gratitude and having those
Mhm.
circles with those other mothers and elders too, because that is the piece, that you're talking about you don't have having to do it on your own.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you for reflecting all that.
Hmm.
Um, and like to add that onto that is that, when we're in this messy humaning process, like raising conscious children, it's like to understand that our children are going to out evolve us, okay, because
Hmm.
we're raising them consciously and because
Yeah.
most of us weren't raised like that. And so
Hmm.
like my daughter is able to speak like that and have this capacity because I raised her consciously since the time she was born, right?
Hmm.
And it's like she can get to these clear places long before I do. I have to like process it and like mull it over. And I'm like in this whole thing. And she's just there, you
Yeah.
know, she doesn't have so much stuff because I've kept her field clean. Right. So I think
Hmm.
part of it in raising teens consciously is to have the humility that they are like so much, um, they're so fucking wise, you
Hmm.
know, and like because we've raised them to be like that. And so it's not to like forget that we're their guide, but it's also to like show up in the truth of who we've raised them to be.
Yeah. Mm.
Mhm. And they're going to school us. And that's the humility, right? It's like they will
Yeah.
school us because all those things that we have taught them through our action and through our connection and through our attachment and through our presence and all the things since birth, like what that actually creates, okay, is like this crazily independent being,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? And
Hmm.
that's that like pain because um like we want to like hold on to them, you know,
Yeah.
and all of that attachment is so that they have the capacity to be.
Yeah. Mm.
Mhm.
And that is the most important piece, right? So many people believe that if you coddle your child by
Mhm.
always responding to them and being attached and being ever present and always meeting their needs and responding to their cries, that somehow they're just going to become over
Mhm.
dependent. They'll never have any independence, but
Mhm.
it's literally the opposite.
Literally.
It's like the deeper you go with them, the happier and freer they'll be as adults, the more
Mhm.
self-esteem that they'll have, the more capacity they'll have to go out on adventures and explore and trust themselves to try new things and take
Mhm.
risks. And yeah, it's a painful, beautiful journey. So thank you for sharing the depths of your own process and your own journey today. And thank you for being the woman that you are, being the mother that you are, and the teacher that you are. I really honor you in that. And I want to invite people to take your programs because now I've said this to my husband a few times, like, there's not a lot of women that I would follow, but I would follow her.
Mhm.
Um, I'm pretty discerning and I really trust my own inner sense. And there's not a lot of women that I come across that I feel like I would just follow. And when I see the offerings that you have and the teachings that you have, it feels really right and true in my bones. And so, where can people find you and work with you more?
Mhm. On my website, it's innatetraditions.com and it's innate traditions on Instagram. And the next postpartum cohort is going to begin January 2025. So that's a
Mhm.
9 month training for birth and healthcare
Mhm.
practitioners. And all of the things are up on my
Mhm.
website.
Do you took a group of parents and teens out on some sort of
Yeah.
retreat, didn't you?
hmm Yeah. And I'm
Do you,
gonna for sure have other things brewing. I'm in
yeah.
conversation right now with a group of parents, actually, because my daughter is gonna be in 8th grade next year. So then it will be like high school years. And we are coming together talking about the potential of creating a high school initiative.
Mhm.
So we will see. I always have things
Mhm.
brewing, but I also am
Yeah.
in this time of my life of like, I am not going to push boulders up mountains anymore because I
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
years doing that. I'm pretty skilled, and I'm more in a time now of like acceptance instead of efforting.
Mhm.
Um, and that's another thing with teens too. It's like we're like, I want like if it was me, she would not be in school and I would be homeschooling. She
Yeah.
wants to be in school. So it's also letting go of what we want
Yeah.
for them. And she is really right now writing this high school
Mhm.
thing. So
Yeah,
we'll
many
see.
of my friends with teens have had that experience as well, going from that
Mhm.
homeschool transition to I really want to go to high school.
Mhm.
And it's tough for everyone, honestly, that transition it seems. And I've people always ask me about, what are you going to do with your daughter? And I was like, well, right now we're going to homeschool and travel, but like she's going to
Yeah.
have to let me know what it is that she wants. And
Yeah.
I'm already seeing what a like vibrantly social, extroverted being she is. And I'm like, she's not going to want to be sitting in the woods in the yurt with me, I don't think.
Totally. Until like, there was a time that she will and there will be a time that she doesn't. And so
Yeah.
that's also, it's like, are we, it's like if we're going to center our kids' needs, right? It means one thing when they're 3, but it means
Hmm.
another thing when they're 13, when they're
Yeah.
16 and like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Amen. Okay, well, I
yeah,
feel like we could just talk forever. I know that we both have to go, but
totally.
thank you for this time, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
talking.